Welcome to another Coffee in English with me, the Alchemist. Today we have a special guest who brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to the table. He is a renowned figure in the fitness industry and co-founder of HITuni. Today we are honored to have the one and only Simon Shawcross with us. Simon is not only a passionate advocate for evidence-based training, but Simon is also a speaker, educator, and co-founder of HITuni, a leading platform for high-intensity training education. In this episode, we will explore Simon's insights into efficient and effective training methods, his thoughts on the ever-evolving landscape of fitness, and perhaps gain some valuable tips for achieving our own health and fitness goals. This episode is sponsored by ThinkFit, an app I personally developed to improve productivity and reduce sedentary behaviors, improving wellness and well-being overall, without impacting on the day-by-day activities, even improving your productivity. For HITuni, use the link on the description and use the code ThinkFit10 for a 10% discount on HITuni. Without further ado, let's dive into the conversation with Simon Shawcross on the Coffee with the Alchemist.
Well, thank you, Simon, for being here with me. Yeah, and let's start introducing yourself a little bit to the audience, and in particular, why and how you did get into this profession and in personal training and high intensity.
Sure. Growing up, I was always a physical person, so I was always doing sports and exercise, not formal exercise, but involved in sports from sort of rugby to football, even things like skateboarding and mountain biking. So a wide array of things. But when I got to around the age of 16, that all kind of stopped for me. And going back all those years, I was studying, but I also got into partying a little bit. And I just lost that side of myself for a while. So tracking forward a few years, when I was 21, I would say, at university, I was actually studying business and marketing at university. And that vein had continued. I had neglected to look after myself physically. So from time to time, I kept having these flashes about needing to get back into shape, wanting to be more physical again. And at that point, I had sort of lost touch with my physicality and didn't really know where to start. So I remember browsing in a bookstore and finding something that was like train like the parachute regiment trains.
And I'm curious, at what time, which year was?
This would have been 1997.
1997. Yeah, because you have a period of crazy new trends, new diets, new trends are coming. So 1998. Okay, yeah.
It would have been 1997. And anyway, so I got this book, which was Train Like the Parachute Regiment. I followed it to a T, did that for 12 weeks, and then decided to join a gym and start doing strength training at a gym. There were other things I was doing at the time. I trained for a marathon. I ran a half marathon. I did some indoor rock climbing. I was just sort of testing the waters again about being physical. Anyway, but something made me gravitate to strength training. I think there was a sense quite deep down that this was the core of exercise, that this was sort of there was something within strength training that was the essence of exercise. I started at a gym and did whatever told me at the gym, which happened to be 5 days a week I think, a 5-way split. So I don't recall off the top of my head exactly what it was, but it was probably chest one day, shoulders another day, back another day, lower body another day, and an accessory day as well. 5 days a week, probably in the gym for about 45 minutes to an hour, and probably each exercise would have been performed for 5 sets. Wow. It was a long workout. It was a tough workout, and I say we trained hard for sure. I trained with the owner of the gym for several months as his training partner, but I was feeling better muscularly, physically, but I was also ended up after, say, 6 months of this, of feeling a general sense of fatigue, too much of the time for my liking. So I started to read around and look for something that made more logical sense to me, that I hadn't really seen the science behind strength training to this point. And then I happened across some writing by a bodybuilder who had been famous during the late 70s and early 80s, and had a resurgence in the 90s through his writing, which was a guy called Mike Mentzer, who you may be familiar with, who was really sort of one of the genesises of high intensity training.
Yeah.
I read it, and it was so revolutionary and contradictory to the training style that I had been doing. Now, we fast forward a bit of time here, and I was in my first full-time job now, and I was finding that 5-day-a-week gym training unsustainable with a job where I was working 12 hours a day.
Wow.
6 days a week. And something had to give. And I really didn't want it to be my physical training, but it couldn't continue in the manner that it had been going. I had nothing to lose by giving Mike Mentzer's writing, his advice, his thoughts on exercise a shot at that point, because it was unsustainable for me to continue training in the manner that I was training. And I think another point to consider is I was at a gym that was kind of like a fairly hardcore bodybuilding gym, and quite a few people were using substances that would enable them to train more frequently and be able to do that. That was not a road that I wanted to go down or ever went down. So I didn't have the luxury of having an enhanced recovery ability, probably genetically either. So I gave this a shot, and I was fascinated by it. And one of the key things that I saw immediately was that I was fresh. I felt fresh in my day-to-day life. I had energy again to get on with everything else. I wasn't feeling continually fatigued from the gym. So it was adding to life rather than taking away. And I was keeping fastidious notes as well. And I could see my strength continuing to increase, probably at a faster pace than it had done on the previous workouts. And not only that, but also my form and my technique was getting better because I was being encouraged through Mike's writing. After, I would say, 6 months of training following Mike Mentzer's advice that I discovered from his writing in magazines and his writing books, I actually got in touch with Mike, and we spoke over the phone several times as well, where he continued to sort of guide me, I would say, and encourage me not only in exercise, but in thinking about the mind and philosophy as well. Yeah.
No, it's very interesting. So you came from the traditional, or you pick up that book, Training Like a Parachuter. So taking back that book, you follow that routine that was, I assuming, was volume oriented, right? It was very heavy in terms of workload, because you mentioned 5 times a week sets, and was very not sustainable and compatible with your working life, normal life, anyone life, unless you are a professional bodybuilder, of course. But and so you went accidentally. You went to, into Mike Manzer, right? You just happened by.
It was as simple as flipping through a magazine, reading an article, and I think my initial reaction to that article was, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But it stayed, and I probably didn't do something about it right away. It might have taken weeks or maybe even a month or two, but that thing was in the back of my mind. Then it's like, I possibly almost even started doing it, hoping it would work, but almost desiring to prove that it was wrong, because it was like so contrary to what I'd been doing for the past 2 years.
There's a lot of time spent, then a lot of energy, and I can relate to that. And that is, we know that also Mike Menzer, maybe our audience will know as well. So Mike Menzer started, and then he changed a little bit. He upgraded himself. He changed a little bit his approach during the period of years. But the concept is remain the base of his work, and is very important for I will post some links about his achievement as well. And so you moved into this new workout routine, which is basically high intensity resistance training or oriented. Can you please a little bit introduce what is this, and then how this link to what you're doing today for living?
Yeah. So after about 3 or 4 months after I'd spoken to Mike and was continuing to follow his advice, I suddenly came sort of a flash of clarity or insight of, why don't more people know about this approach to strength training? And I really want to tell people about this approach to strength training. It made exercise productive, practical, possible, and gave more to my life than it took away. And I think there are many people, in your late teens, early 20s, who get really into exercise and almost become addicts to the gym and a lifestyle. And that's fine. That might be sort of a rite of passage that maybe all of us to some extent need or do end up going through. But once you get past that phase, if you want to get the most out of exercise that actually supports, nourishes, and gives you strength, protects you from the challenges and knocks that you might have in life physically, and I'd say to some extent emotionally and mentally too, high intensity training is such a sound, solid approach to getting realistic long-term results.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah, I also agree about the social aspect of the gym, and okay, you go there to make friends, and also this feeling of. But we know as well that there is a runner's high for people. There are people addicted to running because of this feeling. So it's just this pleasure, the endorphins, and these chemicals, hormones inside. Yeah, but if you look at, again, depending on the goal, depending on your goal, you look at the real life, your real work you do every day, and then you need to be compatible with what you want to achieve. So, and this way of training is perhaps the really good one. It gives you a lot of benefits compared with time. So time efficiency is the key there as well. And so, so you moved into this way of training, and you made a business out of it. So you wrote, I'm also a client of your HITuni, which I assume is emerging high intensity training with the university or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, and what exactly, when you started the HITuni, and how does it work, and what is exactly?
So, like I was sort of finished off saying before, was I really wanted to tell people about this type of training. So in 1999, I decided to become a personal trainer, teaching people this way of training, this approach to exercise specifically. And I did that exclusively from this end of 1999 through to 2012, 2013. So that was what I was doing, 5-6 days a week. I was working with people hands-on directly. And then there was an opportunity to, with the way that sort of the internet had progressed and the way that information was being and could be disseminated, there was an opportunity to present this type of exercise at a global level, or at least currently to people who are capable of understanding the English language, through HITuni, through this online platform with structured courses. So what we do at HITuni is our flagship programs are 3 programs aimed at people who want to be personal trainers, who already are personal trainers, but in a sort of more traditional approach to exercise and want to convert over to being able to teach high intensity training effectively, and a master's trainers course, which really dives deep on all the aspects of high intensity training. And then that's sort of our flagship programs. And then we have these currently 7 short courses, which are aimed at the general public, aimed at everybody, trainers, the general public, people who want to get fit themselves. And so we cover lots of different flavors and approaches to high intensity training through those shorter courses. So if you want to be able to train at home without any equipment, we've got a course or a couple of courses that will enable you to do that. If you want to look at really low volume high intensity training, we have a course with John Little that focuses on that. If you want to look at sort of bringing in high intensity training to support other athletic endeavors, like running, for example, we have a course for that. So we have these sort of different strands or flavors of HIT represented in the shorter courses as well.
Yeah. I enrolled, I think, a few of them, and the good thing is short, concise, and then very specific to certain. So is running with strength, is for running. Then you have Jay Vincent, I think, as well. To Bill De Simone is for a functional exercise. Yeah, and then all these small pieces, and then of course the master path course. And coming back to your current routine, so are you still working out the same way, or what has changed through the years, and what your personal experience?
Yeah, so I like to experiment. I like to keep things fresh, and I like to test out theories. So over that, say, since 1999 till now, I've gone up and down in terms of exercise volume, how many exercises you're performing in one workout. I've gone up and down in terms of frequency, how often you're training the whole body or a specific muscle group. And I have played with different variables, different approaches to applying it, so using body weight exclusively, using no load, using free weights only, using machines only, a mixture, just to find out what variables work or can be made to work really well, and within what context. So I suppose I'm somebody who is never satisfied with the status quo or homeostasis. I'm just looking to push things just to see what works. And I think the science is fantastic, and the science has evolved over the last 25 years. You know, sometimes you could say it's at a glacial pace, but it evolves, and it presents, as science does, it often presents more questions, or as many questions as it answers. But one of the great things about being embodied in human form is that at the end of the day, you are the only person living in your exact physiology. And it's great to take advice from other people and to pick up approaches from other people. And at a very core level, especially with strength training, I'd say what's absolutely key is how to apply it safely. That's absolutely, you know, if you're doing something which is for your strength and the health of your bones, your joints, your muscle tissue, your tendons, and you're doing it for their longevity as well, number one priority has to be safety, and number two, effectiveness, or those two are like tied together. If you're doing something in the gym that you're doing purely for a strengthening goal that injures you, something's gone wrong, because you're doing this to make yourself more resilient, to make yourself more capable over the long term. The moment you injure your back or your shoulder significantly, you suddenly realize how important that safety factor is. When you're crippled with pain, acute pain from tweaking your back or your shoulder, you'll suddenly realize a system that often we take for granted, when it's not operating as you expect it to, is massively debilitating. So I like to experiment with variables, but I say what underpins my training and is it the forefront in my mind with my training is safety first. And then I'm looking to make it as effective / efficient as possible.
Well, very good. Well, yeah, I'm really into the audience as well, into biohacking and longevity. And this factor is also important. Last time I've been asked in terms of nootropics or biohacking as well, what is more effective, but it depends on the goal. So you mentioned, if you are a professional bodybuilder or professional athlete, you must do something for that. So, but in the older I mean, I'm now 46, and I really need to think about recovery in case of injury. So because at 20 years old is a little bit easier, so people are doing crazy stuff, even extreme sports, but yeah, with age, I think is even more important, this fact. And then if your target is, your goal is longevity. So first, okay, safety first, but then also wear and tear of the joints, the muscles. So it's really important, because you are creating damage and you need to recover from damage. And then, so yeah, it's very interesting. And then in fact, you are experimenting and the self-quantification stuff is really important in the biohacking community. And I assume when the time you test, you record in some way, so in any parameter, so to understand what is working for you. But for instance, you use HRV, or what kind of parameters you are tracking? Or
my core parameters that I'm tracking is strength increase, and interestingly, it would relate to HRV, but general sense of well-being and energy levels. Because for me, what I can find is that I can get excited and want to push the envelope on intensity or want to push the envelope on frequency, the first warning sign to me is a sort of general sense of fatigue that creeps up slowly, and before you know it, it's kind of got to you. And I don't currently track HRV, but I have done in the past, and I found that very useful, sort of recalibrating where and when to look out for the warning signs and what the physiologic warning signs are that HRV points to, but then to become better at not needing the metric necessarily, because you can associate with this the sensations, the feelings that are happening in your body, in your nervous system. The HRV has pointed you toward, and you go, okay, so yeah, the first thing I notice if I'm doing too much is that, I mean, so one example would be, I found that if I train too late in the day, I can't go to high intensity training, resistance training too late in the day. I can't sleep. So I can't sleep till like 3 a.m. If I train at 3 p.m, I'll struggle to be asleep by 3 a.m. If I train by 11 a.m, I'm fine. I can fall asleep by 10:30 at night. And it's these type of things that you collect, and that may not be the same for everybody. Like I may release more epinephrine and a hormonal cascade in response to the next person might. But yeah, it leads on. So I have to adapt to these things. And I've only learned these things through experience. And then yeah, sort of like the other thing I'm very aware of is if I have this sense of not necessarily mental, but a physical fatigue that starts very slowly if I'm pushing the envelope too much, and I can ignore it and push through it for a week, maybe 2 weeks, but it catches up with me. And then it also makes me more susceptible to like colds and flus that my kids might be bringing home from school and so on. And it's catching it before then and not getting into this mindset of like, I'm just going to keep plowing ahead. And like, as a young man, that was always my philosophy. It was like, yeah, I keep hammering it out of the park. And in some ways, that kind of attitude, when I first started training, would have been on the emphasis of volume and frequency, like going to the gym every day, 5 days a week, and doing 4 sets per exercise and 10, 15 exercises per workout. And that's where that energy was put. That can get translated for some people when they find out about HIIT and they chase the intensity envelope even too far sometimes. So like, they'll really hammer muscular failure, but then I want to go, well, I'll go into a long isometric level of fatigue, which is deeper than I don't want to get too technical. I'm not sure how much your audience will know of the lingo, but it's a deeper level of fatigue than normal muscular failure. And then I've had periods when I've gone, and I've done this, I've been guilty of this, and I'm going to add eccentric overload, and I'm going to fatigue the muscle eccentrically as well. And like, you can dig a hole that's too deep for yourself to get out of. So this mindset, and I know have been very guilty of it, of like pursuing something and being determined to like pursue it to the nth degree, can become a bit of an undo. I think what you talked about with age, if you're looking for the metrics and you're seeing this, hopefully you accumulate some wisdom and you begin to know, okay, where do I fall on spec? What do I need to be looking out for? But to cut, I've given you a very long answer to a very simple question. When it comes to strength training, if you're keeping your technique on the exercises tight and good and proper, and you're not cheating a little bit differently than you did last week, strength increases are the best thing to look at to know if a program is working for you. In black and white, if your performance is the same quality on today's workout as it was last week's workout, and you've increased a rep, 2 reps, or you've increased 10 seconds longer time under load, or 10 seconds longer in the exercise, or you've increased the load fractionally, you've got a similar, you are improving, your physiology has recovered, responded, and is able to produce a response that we're looking for from hypertension. The moment you start to see repeated deterioration in strength gains, and not one workout, as I'm sure you would know, like if you have one workout, it can be a little bit off for a number of reasons. You haven't slept as well, your nutrition's not been quite as on point, work stresses have been greater. It's possible to have a one-off bad workout. And so we shouldn't be too granular when looking at this. What I like to do is look over the course of a month. Over the course of a month, in general, has my strength increased? If it has, the workouts are doing their job. If over the course of a month I've stagnated or even slightly dipped, now I need to address something.
Yeah, fully aligned. Yeah, and that is very, as you mentioned correctly, this is something that's working for you. And I think I'm aligned with that, because others are studying the hormonal balance and the cycle of hormones during the day. I read somewhere that if the strength training, the best is in the afternoon, because your muscles are warmed up, and there are any other things in terms of hormonal stuff. But again, if you train in the afternoon and very, very hard, very high intensity, on the other side, the opposite effect would be impacting on sleep, which again, tracking and having a personalized approach is the right things to do in this case.
Yeah, and I think being aware of your circadian rhythm and how that works best for you, and keeping a consistency in terms of what time you go to bed, what time you get up in the morning, what time you eat, having that consistency, and then a consistency of what time you train, if possible, for your life, with your lifestyle, and what other activities, physical or meditation wise, you do. It's like figuring out, and I would say consistency is key to so many of these things, and establishing a pattern that the body works best in or optimally in for you.
Well, okay, let's go now into some specific or into the fitness and workout and some. I listed something because I asked as well. I think Doug McGuff about the sweat, because and this is maybe your experiences. We can go quickly over these questions because are very based on personal experience and some misconceptions and questions that people are raising when talking about high intensity, and in particular if from the Body by Science protocol, the basic Big Five or any other. I say, okay, you do this 20 minutes, no sweat, and then you go home, you go, and then next week. So I think there's the same impact Mike Menzel had on you at that time that you were reading this new type of training. So in your experience, is this real? Is something that you are seeing for your client before now in yourself?
So is the question, I haven't quite got the question, is sweating necessary?
This is one
sort of along those lines. Yeah, so sweating is very necessary if your body is overheating. Absolutely. If you're in an environment where your body needs to regulate and you need to sweat, you better sweat. That is not necessarily then an optimal environment for training your muscles, because you've got this other thing your body has to do in addition to target muscle motor units and fatigue them or activate them. Now your body's also got to keep itself cool enough to be able to do that. Whereas if you adapt the temperature of the environment so that you don't need to produce sweat, and your body only has to focus on recruiting and activating muscle fibers, motor units, then made the job a little bit easier for the body in terms of it doesn't have to marshal some resources to keeping you cool enough at the same time. So yes, there was this sort of like old school attitude of like, you've got to sweat it out, you've got to sweat. And I suppose a little bit of that also comes in from sort of making weight for boxing or mixed martial arts, where, you know, sweating is used to reduce body weight temporarily to make weight for a division. But that's not a particularly healthy thing to be doing. And of course, if you're outside, if you're somebody who runs or you do an outdoor activity in an environment where it's warm enough or you're wearing clothing and you're working hard enough that you need to sweat, you must sweat. You need to sweat to be able to continue surviving. But in the environment of strength training specifically for adaptations of the muscular system and all the down chain and up chain changes or physiologic enhancements that makes, there's no desire or need or reason to sweat if you're in an environment where your body doesn't need to do that.
Yeah, that's great answer. I think is aligned as well with what I think Dr. McCaff has said. So yeah, because there is this misconception, maybe it's coming from boxing or is if you're not sweating, then you're not having results, which is nonsense, because again, this is a tool the body has to regulate temperature. So if you simply, I used to run a 5K in Dubai and I was sweating without moving. And so I don't think I was exercising, but yeah, it's completely different. Yeah, very good point. And another point is how, in particular, when training high intensity, the importance of breathing, because there are many training or personal training classical courses. You can breathing some way, concentric and eccentric, different phase. So how is important the breathing, and in particular when working out in high intensity?
We want to always be providing oxygen for the system to be able to perform optimally first and foremost. So reducing oxygen supply is not a good thing to do. And the moment, I suppose in strength training, where you'll often see it is somebody holds their breath to assist them in lifting a very heavy load. And it's a technique that sort of power lifters and Olympic lifters will use, because what that does is you're closing the glottis, you're shutting off this area, and you're creating a sort of an effective brace through the body to push through, to lift that heavier load. What that does mean is that it's not so much the targeted muscles that are working harder. It's just you're creating an environment where you can almost mechanically lift more because you've created this brace of holding the breath, or that holding the breath creates, which, you know, you need potentially to do in if you're lifting weights for a sport. But if you're lifting weights for the goal of having optimally strong muscle tissue and tendons and so on, it's not adding anything. In fact, it's potentially taking something away, because when you're creating this brace, you can be offloading the load from the targeted muscles. Now, from a health perspective, the other issue with holding your breath during resistance training or strength training is that in the moment you do that, you're increasing your blood pressure.
Yeah.
You're spiking your blood pressure. And so what can happen is you start to burst blood vessels, or particularly in the eyes, it can be problematic. You're putting strain on the entire system that doesn't need to be there. Again, if you're training for the benefit of your body exclusively, as opposed to wanting to be able to say, I lifted 150 kilograms in this lift.
In terms of that's talking again, another thing during exercise is exercise order. So the order, the sequence, and so you mentioned that you switched different types and reps, numbers, volume, etc. So, but in terms of what is physiologically important, the impact on metabolic stress, all this stuff. So, how the exercise order is important, and what's your approach in general, just when exercising?
So I'm not particularly concerned with that. So that sort of global metabolic conditioning, which was a concept that I first came across, I believe, in Doug McGuff and John Little's book, Body by Science, which is a great book, is by doing sort of these big exercises close together and say, starting with the exercise in which the most musculature is engaged, followed by the exercise next, but the next most amount of musculature and so on, is effectively keeping and taking minimal rest breaks, is keeping the heart rate high, and it's providing this rather large metabolic stress. So it's effectively a form of conditioning. It's creating a form of conditioning. Now, I would say doing that could probably be useful if you're particularly useful if you're involved in a sport or an activity which would have a similar type of metabolic requirement. So like maybe wrestling or Brazilian jiu-jitsu or something like that, where you're using a lot of muscular strength, and once you're like, 2 minutes on the mat and struggling with somebody and your breathing's going, that's quite a similar type of has quite a similar impact on the metabolism as this thing. But from a sort of a specifically sort of health perspective, I'd say that it's not needed to be done. If you care about having that specific condition to be able to do a lot of work close together, big muscle group, then it is definitely useful. But I suppose what I'm focused more on in my own training at the moment would be the quality of the muscular contractions that any muscle group is having at this point in time. And I'm not really looking to push that energy flow of keeping that heart rate all the way through the workout, because at a muscular level, at a cellular level within the muscles, that's not making much of a difference. You're effectively conditioning yourself, being able to do that. And that comes down, again, that sort of moves towards that whole sports conditioning argument of, it's like, if you're involved in an activity or a sport that you want to be good at, you have to perform that to not only get your nervous system, your coordination required for that, but also the specific metabolic challenge that activity requires of you. Now, in my strength training currently, I'm not looking for a specific sort of metabolic adaptation other than what's happening in the muscles as all of the motor units are being used, pulled and used. So I think that's one of those things that's a personal choice. And I've been through periods of time during my training process where I really, really enjoy that high metabolic challenge. of like, say, a big 5 back to back, no rest between the exercises, bang, 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 bang. Do them all. You really feel it. You're breathing like a train. You know, you might need to lie down immediately after the last exercise, or even halfway through, have a quick pause. It can serve in an enjoyable and challenging way to train. But it's another tool in the toolbox. But I would say it's not essential to train in that manner to get the results in the strengthening and what's happening at a cellular level within the muscle tissue.
Yeah, perfect. I agree, fully agree. And I personally, I do alternate also in terms of variety. I alternate. So maybe once every 2 weeks, I don't know, I increase this factor. And so having back-to-back exercise. So, or even inducing hypoxia, even when climbing stairs. So when I go to the office, I try to do with in an hypoxia state. But I think this is part of the resilience factor for the body overall, beside any workout or exercise regimen.
The other thing where order is really important is what are you looking to do? What are you looking to do with that order? So in high intensity training, traditionally there's been an approach called pre-exhaust, where you're exhausting a muscle group in exercise number 1, and that muscle group is going to be used again in exercise number 2, and so you're deliberately pre-exhausting it before you get to the next exercise, and that can be a technique that you want to use for a period of time. And so there are all sorts of different reasons for the order, and I think so long as you can make a case for why you're doing that order, and again, foremost, that order is safe. So, for example, I wouldn't do like a MEDEX isolation lumbar exercise and then go into a stiff leg deadlift straight after it. You see, so that's that safety point. But so long as you can make a case for why you're positioning that order and you have a purpose behind that, almost any order can work. So, for example, you know, there's the thing of like always train the biggest muscle group first, which makes sense in many ways because it requires the most energy. With a leg press, some people do that and they feel too fatigued to engage in the rest of the workout.
So let's jump in another topic or name or misconception of what does functional exercise mean for you? This is the same question I asked Bill De Simone. So I'm curious to understand your approach, because nowadays functional is everywhere. There is everywhere. Sorry, everywhere there is functional coffee, functional everything. So
yeah, for me, the raw essence of that term, the way I use it and interpret it, is something that enables you to function better outside the gym. So to me, what we do with high intensity training is very functional training. By training in this focused, contained, highly efficient and effective approach to strength training, maximizing safety and minimizing risk of injury, you are making yourself, in a physiologic sense, more functional for everything you then engage with outside of gym. That's functional training. Now, we've got a course with Bill on functional training, with Bill De Simone, who you just mentioned you've already spoken to. And I would say he may get a little bit more specific than I just have and say, well, it would include things like the ability to stabilize your joints whilst you're performing the typical strengthening exercise we do in high intensity training. So the sort of fairly simple movement patterns that we tend to use in high intensity training. The functional means or enhancing functionality or functionability means being able to hold the joint stable in a safe position throughout those exercises. I know Bill would include integrated movement, so where you're performing whole body movements, which in pure high intensity training we tend not to do, and that's where you're using the whole body as a unit and you're acquiring the skill to do so safely.
Yeah.
Now, that I would say no need to do that type of training unless you like the challenge of it, you desire to do that. Will it have a direct enhancement? Anything you do outside of the gym is questionable. But what I would say that's great about it is outside high intensity training, I like to move my body. If you enjoy performing movement patterns that are skills, I think it can be a very valid thing to do, even though it falls outside the traditional canon of high intensity training. And then I know the other thing Bill would focus on, and he does so in the course that we have on HITuni, is stretching to enhance any deficits that you have in sort of range of motion. And stretching can certainly be really useful. You know, there's the often repeated phrase in high intensity of training that you don't need to stretch because you're taking your exercises for a full range of motion. Well, that's true if you're using sort of the best equipment and you are capable of moving pain-free through that full range of motion. But if you're using body weight or using free weights, that's not usually possible to train a muscle group or a joint through its full range of motion. So if you have a deficiency around a joint, in flexibility around a joint, then it can be useful to add stretching to a routine. And stretching is one of those things that can get abused and overused, which then becomes an issue, because if you create a joint that can go beyond its normal range of motion, become hypermobile, you're setting yourself up for a greater risk of injury. But anyway, if you have a muscle group that's tight, meaning you're not able to get a full range of motion around a joint, stretching, at least over the short term, can be a really useful addition to your strength training. And then people say, oh, well, when would you do it? And there's sort of like old school advice about sort of warming up and stretching before your strength workout, which we know today you should definitely not do, because even fairly moderate stretching prior to a strength workout means you are not as strong when it comes to your actual strengthening exercises. So you don't want to put yourself in a place where you're weaker prior to strengthening. Also, your muscles are likely to be less elastic. Your tendons like to be less elastic because you're not sort of fully worn out. So if you're combining strength training, flexibility, the best place with stretching, separate stretching, the best place to do it is after your strength workout, when the muscles are and tendons and joints are warmed up, synovial fluid flowing. That's when you're going to get the greatest advantage from doing any stretching.
I agree.
And the same would apply if you're going to sprint. Don't do prolonged stretching before going to sprint. You're not going to be able to produce as much force through the muscles that you need to be able to sprint optimally if that's something you do. So yeah, to me, proper high intensity training, pure high intensity training, strength training is functional exercise. And there are some tweaks, but yes, I agree. A sort of functional gets thrown out there as this sort of catch-all term that can mean crawling on the ground or throwing kettlebells around, and it can mean all sorts standing on a balance board and doing all sorts of things. And sometimes I would say, if you want to improve your balance, do it for the thing that you specifically want to improve your balance for. Like, if you want to improve your balance for surfing, probably don't stand on a wobble board at the gym. Get out and surf. Mimic or match exactly the conditions in which you need that balance.
Yeah, perfect. I fully align. Yeah, I among the things I've been doing in the past is a CrossFit as well. I've done CrossFit as well. I had some problems, but yeah. But and when I was laughing the first time I did the farmer's walk, because the first time
you should be paying me to do this. I'm carrying weights around.
I am carrying groceries, so why do I have to carry something? The concept behind there is something, but as you mentioned, keep a skill and specific functional training separate. But stretching is a good point. I try to keep separate for any session. There is some other studies saying it, in particular, where after strength training, stretching may be, I don't know how much truth there is behind, is reducing the benefits from strength training in terms of muscular adaptation. But maybe this is one point.
I'm not sure about that, because I think there are other research studies that show stretching even between strength training exercise in a workout can enhance the muscular response, the strengthening, hypertrophy response. So maybe I do a form of qigong on a daily basis, which is sort of gentle, dynamic, slow stretching movements, which I do primarily because I just enjoy moving my body in a meditative way. But I do, so for example, I do it completely separately from my strength workout. Like I mentioned before, I do my strength training workout in mid-morning, sort of 11:30, 12 p.m. at the latest. Then I'll do that qigong movement pattern session, which I do every day, at around 4 in the afternoon, 5 in the afternoon. And it's a way of moving and being one with my body. I'm not specifically doing it for any desired adaptation other than that sense of being in the body at the moment.
Perfect. And I just finished the book Deep Fitness. It was, I think, suggested also by Dr. McGuff. When is basically high intensity resistant training meeting mindfulness. So and breathing, and so how to be mindful during the high intensity training exercise is interesting, and it's nothing new.
I think that's super important.
Yeah.
Talk about in strength training being intrinsically focused or extrinsically focused. So extrinsically focused is when you're focused on lifting the most weight and just getting it from point A to B. And that's great if you want to demonstrate that strength again. But if you want quality of loading to the muscles that you're targeting to produce a response, an intrinsic focus is much better. So it's being aware of the movement that your nervous system is producing, being in that, being aware of the muscles doing their work, being focused on the sensations in the muscles. So you're not focused on lifting a load from A to B, much as you are focused on the contraction or contractions of the muscle or muscles that you're targeting. And that is very akin to a meditative mindset. So it's being no distractions at one with the muscle or muscle groups you're working, aware of the movement, aware of the sensations, aware of the building up of the sensation of fatigue as it accumulates during the set, and so on. And I think that's a very, very useful way to engage in high intensity strength training.
Yeah, perfect. And as we
I'm also a big fan of meditation separately as well. So I focus on getting in meditation twice a day, 24 minutes in the morning, 24 minutes later on in the day. So
this is
I like
on top of the Qigong. So
yes,
Qigong,
that's separate from the Qigong.
Okay, so this is quite. I try to squeeze this, sessions. I use different binaural beats and other tools and mobile apps. In the morning when I complete my workout, I usually end with a short meditation. This because I've been tested the slope of the curve. Basically, this after this high intensity training, I try to move quickly to a relaxed state. So as soon as I complete my workout, I go to try to do some meditation. So to go to alpha state. So I'm testing also this, and this is quite effective as well, and also in terms of recovery. But since we are talking about the power of the mind, basically we naturally move to the next questions. It was about the no external load training. That was something I discovered in HITuni, and I enrolled to the course as well. So because this is a sort of paradox as well, another one on top of the discuss. So can you please tell us more about what's that no external load training and Excel short, and is based on science. That's just I'm curious.
Yeah, so no external load training or no load training is where you are not using weights. You're not even using your body weight to activate muscle fibers without the traditional things we use, body weight, free weights, machines, and so on. The key stimulus, what you need to have happen to enhance strength and stimulate hypertrophy in muscles is muscle fiber activation. So long as you can activate the muscle fibers, you can produce the stimuli and response to that stimuli. So what you're doing with no load training, if you take a biceps curl, for example, is you're following this movement pattern of that movement at the elbow joint, contracting, shortening the bicep muscle. Now, do that. You can just move it up and fling it up. But you can willfully contract that muscle up and stop it from moving up freely by creating a contraction, an opposite contraction in the muscle that's antagonist to that, so the triceps muscle. So effectively what's happening is you're making the triceps muscle do eccentric contraction to slow or semi-halt the progress of the concentric contraction of the biceps. So in that one movement, going up and down, hinging at the elbow joint, you're stimulating both the biceps and the triceps. One's going through a concentric contraction, a shortening, whilst the other one is lengthening, and then vice versa. So then the other one shortens, and the other side of the joint is lengthening. So you're causing muscle fiber activation by that using opposing muscle groups, and you can do that for muscles on either side of all the joints in your body. So it's a way of training if you don't want to go to a gym, if you don't want to have dumbbells and chin-up bars cluttering your home, or you're traveling and you're staying in hotels and you don't want to try to figure out the machines at the hotel, or whatever it is, or you're on a desert island and you don't have anything to train with, you can still get a highly effective, very, very effective as any other means, so long as, and the point that you started this topic of no load training off with, so long as you can mentally engage the muscles to do that, and you're aware of doing that, because it's very easy to just go through the motions. Yep. If you haven't got a load, you can just go and nothing's going to happen. You're not doing it. You're not activating a higher order units. You're not firing off those fibers. There's no mechanotransduction. So nothing is going to, there's no stimulus. So you need an awareness of the muscles that produce movement around the joints, when they contract, when they stretch, and how to use those two opposing muscles on either side of the joint, or muscle groups on either side of the joint, effectively, and be fully in that. So it's a very deep, focused mental meditative approach as well. So that's why we've got a course on that on HITuni, because it does take some rewiring of the mind and the nervous system to be able to do it effectively. But if you get it, you could train anywhere with literally zero equipment. So it's
that's why
highly useful.
It's very mindful. That you have to be mindful. It's not working, and then you can do it. Even now, I can do it when you don't realize. So it's very interesting. It's another tool in the toolbox.
It's a very pure form of training the muscles, because there's not this load that you're using. You are literally engaging exclusively, your muscles, your musculoskeletal system, to produce this force that the muscles are experiencing exclusively through your own muscles. And so so long as you have that the correct mindset to do it, you can get a tremendous amount out of it.
Yeah, great stuff. And as we are moving at the end of this conversation, we can have another one maybe later in the future. And but I'm talking about nutrition, diet, and supplements. So, what are you actually in? Because we know that this is another Pandora box when we talk about pre-workout, post-workout, protein intake. So, but in your personal experience, do you have any preference or any effective supplements or routine when matching the high intensity training?
I would say I've seen so many trends come and go in nutrition. For strength training, the most important thing is that you're meeting your protein requirements, which is very, very easy to do. It doesn't require, supplementation by whey protein powders and so on. It's very easy to meet your protein requirements. But you need to meet them. And then I would say, bottom line, end of the day, it comes down to your personal preferences and what works for you. For me, that essentially means skipping breakfast. I don't typically eat breakfast. I eat 2 meals a day usually, and they consist of protein, carbs, and fats. I'm not, outside of meeting the protein requirements, I tend to eat what I enjoy. When I say enjoy, I mean whole foods, meat, vegetables, a carb source, and fats that they get cooked in or added to it. And so long as I'm not gaining excessive body fat or gaining much or any body fat, and I'm not losing muscle tissue, and I'm enjoying what I eat, that's key to me after years of, especially at the start of this process, if we go back to 97, taking this supplement, that supplement, all sorts of cutting out carbs almost entirely. I never was really on the reduced fat thing ever, even though maybe at the very start of the bodybuilding strength training process back in 97, 98, it was quite trendy to sort of only have lean sources of protein like turkey and maybe chicken. But in terms of what I eat now, it's like my favorite meat is but I eat chicken, fish, steak, pork, lamb, green leafy vegetables, sweet potatoes, rice, and then the fats, olive oil. My partner's Greek, so we tend to have a lot of olive oil in our cooking, and butter, which we use a lot in the UK. I don't micromanage my nutrition. It's very simple for me to sort of effectively fast for sort of 16-ish hours and then eat twice, lunch and dinner, within a sort of 8-hour feeding window. And I know there's people out there who get all sorts of great responses from going, 100% carnivore or keto, or going in totally vegetarian or whatever. If it works for you, great. Meet your protein requirements, eat in a way that you enjoy, minimize processed food, minimize processed food, but you should be metabolically flexible enough to enjoy a treat from time to time as well. That's really where I'm at. You could almost say it's quite an agnostic approach nowadays. I'm not looking to micromanage it or go too deep on it. It works for me. I think the reality is, in today's Western world, at least, the biggest issue we have is overly processed foods. And if this doesn't apply to your audience, because I'm sure they're already doing far more than this already in general. But if you can move away from processed food towards foods that, Doug Muff once said to me, you could catch on the end of a spear or pick off a tree or pull out of the ground, you're kind of good to go. Yeah. Doing that is moving in a hugely positive direction that's going to make, I would say, 80%, maybe more of a difference. And then if you're the kind of person who's fascinated by nutrition and wants to deep dive for a bit, great. I've gone through that at different points in my life. I've done the supplements, I was sort of went for a phase of doing the nootropics and stuff like that. Had fun experimenting with that stuff. Right now, I'm kind of back to basics kind of guy on that front.
Yeah, I think we're the same. Yeah, I think we are the same. I think Jeff has mentioned something like PE diet or something. But in short, is if you reduce at minimum the distance between what you eat and the sun, it's fine. So I think that this is far away. That the longer that the process chain is, that you're getting far from the source of the light and energy of the sun. But if you pick up something from the tree, apples as a whole food, you're good. Yeah, but
I like that,
interesting. Yeah, this is very good. And so we are at the end of the call, fortunately. But to end, where our listeners can find you, first thing, and then I remember I downloaded a complete beginner's guide to high intensity resistance training. I think it's still available. Can you please confirm that?
Yeah, sure. Best place to find me is HITuni.com, HITuni.com. I got to sort of teased you a little bit earlier. We've got some exciting new stuff coming out fairly soon. We've got all those great courses you were talking about. That's where I write. It's been quiet a bit recently because I've been working behind the scenes on this new course, but that's where sort of all the stuff that I put out goes first and foremost. And then, yeah, absolutely. That document that you referred to, Complete Beginner's Guide to high intensity strength training, it was a sort of put together out of 3 or 4 very long form blog posts that I did, sort of introducing high intensity training from sort of like beginner's mindset from the ground up. And when I got to the end of writing those posts, I was like, this is what if somebody had given this to me when I was starting my whole adventure back in 96, 97 into strength training, it would have been a really, really useful tool to have at that time. And so we put it together into one downloadable PDF, which is, absolutely, that's still available. You're right.
I really like the graphics and the layout. Recommend, and I will post all the links in the show notes. I am full disclaimer, I'm a client of HITuni, and I have an affiliate link as well. So I will be posting all the links in the show notes for the audience. So, and I will stay tuned for the new coming soon training course. So, having said so, thank you very much, Simon, and I really enjoy this time, and thanks again for your time. I know you're very busy, and now we are short of time as well here on the room. So thanks again.
I've really, really enjoyed our conversation, Manlio, and it was always fun talking about this stuff.
Did you like this episode? If so, simply subscribe, thumbs up, and click on the notification bell not to lose any opportunity in the future. And remember, sharing is caring, even for a coffee. Even better. Till next time, see you soon.